Welcome to the Successful Real Estate Broker Podcast, where we learn about some success stories and some not so successful stories. But either way, we learn. Each episode, we talk with successful real estate agents and vendors about things they have done to make them successful and some things they did that you might want to avoid. Join us for each episode of the Successful Real Estate Broker Podcast with your host, Preston Sandlin.
All right, listeners. Well, thank you all for tuning in to the Successful Real Estate Broker Podcast. And speaking of which, I have a successful real estate podcast person here. Yes, person. Too many. Sally sells, she sells. Mr. Brian McCarron. How you doing, Brian?
Hey, Preston. Good. How are you?
I'm good. Well, the reason I brought Brian on is this guy is everywhere. I really think there's two of them. I think he has a twin brother somewhere. But this guy is at every event. He's all over social media. So, Brian, you're killing it on your omnipresence. So, but before, I want to get into how you do all that and all your social media stuff. But first, let's get a little background. I did a little snooping on you. It says you're from New York. What was it?
Franklin Square.
Yeah.
A little small town in Nassau County on Long Island, in New York. Pretty close to Queens, New York. If you know where that is, most people can get a gander on where that is. Moved down here in the Carolinas, to Mooresville, North Carolina, originally in 2006, actually.
Awesome. So what brought you here initially? And I know you have 3 kids. So tell us all of that. What brought you to the Carolinas? And wife and kids, and how did all that happen?
So it's kind of funny. Actually, my ex-wife's family brought us down here. So what I mean by that is, they had moved from Long Island to Mooresville. They bought a house, and at this point, I think I was 23, 24, something like that. And her and I were dating. We weren't married yet, and both of us were still living with parents up on Long Island. We're like, well, we came down. We saw this mansion they bought in Mooresville for like $300,000, and the property taxes were like, I don't know, $2,400 a year or something like that, I think is what I remember. And I'm like, geez, I can't even get like a Cracker Jack box on Long Island, or should, even for what they were paying in their mortgage, you could rent a basement apartment on Long Island. And it was like insane. Like, I'm like, I can't build my life this way. Like, it just seemed unattainable. And so I said, all right, well, at that time I was selling cell phones. I was working for an independent cell phone dealer up on Long Island. I'm like, well, if I could get a job doing this down here, then why the heck wouldn't I move, So I actually applied for a job with Alltel Wireless. I don't know if you remember them.
Oh, yeah. I had that phone for a little while, I think.
So I had a job with them as a sales rep for about 3 years, and then Verizon Wireless bought us. During that time, got married, had my first child, Sean, who's 16 now. And we bought our first house in Mooresville. Scary, because I bought the house in February of 2008. By May of 2008, I think my house I paid $185,000 for it. And to scare a lot of people, that mortgage payment, I think my interest rate was like mid sixes. And so the mortgage payment was like $1,300 a month, which was reasonable. It wasn't terribly more than we were paying for rent we were renting a single family house. So like, all right, we'll buy a house. And in May, I'm like, what in the world did I do? Because now this house was worth $40,000 or $50,000 less than I paid for. I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, well, I'm not planning on moving, so I'm sure it'll all be fine. And so life went on, and me and her split, and I ended up moving to Fort Mill, South Carolina, renting a place there, rented my house out, hung on that for a few more years, met my wife, Lauren, now, and we got married, and we've got 2 kids, and are on our second house together in Indian Land, South Carolina. And so shortly after we got married, a couple of things took place where I'm like, I was working corporate America, and it was just, if you've worked corporate America, you know how the grind can be. You know how it is. You're working for somebody that really has no say in your future, I guess you could say. You're just going to continue trading time for money. And I bought and sold a little bit of real estate at this point. I'm like, well, this would be cool. And I had talked to somebody more to find out, what's involved in being a real estate agent. Being a resident in South Carolina, I had to get my license there first. So I took classes at night while I was still working. Went and tested for my North Carolina license in early 2016. So I got South Carolina at 15, got North Carolina at 16, worked almost the end of 2016 and quit my job at Verizon and decided to go into real estate full time. It was really tough to kind of balance the two, try to, service clients and still work a full-time job. But it was a little scary. It's the only thing I had ever known work-wise.
Right.
I've been selling cell phones since 2002. So it's like 13, 14 years of selling cell phones. I'm like, oh, great. I'm going to jump from selling cell phones to selling houses. How's this going to go? But, since then, worked it for myself for a while, worked on a couple of successful teams, and now, starting to grow my own team and just really enjoy helping people. And man, oh man, I mean, real estate has changed so much even over the 7-8 years that I've had my license now. I mean, the industry has changed. And really, before it was just about kind of connecting with people. Now it's about getting out in front of people and people you never met, may never meet, that will send your information to some stranger that lives in your market, So,
Right. No, awesome. And, it seems like your timing is impeccable, Brian. You bought a house in 2008. You got in real estate right before no, actually, 2016 was good. It was you probably had about 3 or 4 good years there. And then all of a sudden, 2020, 21, and, through today have been a little bit more challenging. So tell us a little bit about that.
Man.
How has real estate changed since you've been in it?
Well, shoot, when you first started out real estate, I mean, houses would sit on the market 30, 40, 60 days sometimes, because there was plenty of inventory. There was a fair amount of buyers. I mean, interest rates were palatable. They were, 4, 5, 6s, depending on what time frame we're talking about. And, payments were reasonable. House prices were still reasonable. I could, let's say a house listed for $200,000. I could shoot an offer for 195 and ask for 5,000 in closing costs. And they're like, okay.
Probably get it.
Probably get it. Then 2020 hits. 2020 was crazy to me because we went from March, the market was starting to heat up just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden the government says, you can't go inside houses. You're not essential. And we go,
right. Well, I remember it was
places
March
to live, right? Like, doesn't
like
that seem
a week
like
after my birthday? It was like the middle of March. They shut everything down.
It was crazy. Like, my wife and kids and we had taken a short vacation to Florida, and the world was literally shutting down as we were driving home. Like, we were stopping at random BJ's and Costco's, trying to find diapers for our kid because the word on the street was like, you can't get diapers, you can't get toilet paper. Like, we're stuffing the back of our minivan with diapers and toilet paper just because like this is crazy. Why can't you get toilet paper and diapers? I don't know. Let's grab some. Like, we're driving up 95, coming from Florida. I'm like, oh, there's BJ's here. Let's pull over. And we get home and they're like, hey, you can't show any houses. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, my wife works in the medical field, so we didn't know what was going to happen with her work. And I'm like, oh gosh, I can't get in houses. How do I sell houses? So started getting on social media, talking to people, doing virtual tours. And then they said, hey, you could show houses again. Okay, great. Well, now we went from all these people, I feel like it was almost a period of like 3 to 4 weeks where it was like taboo to get inside a house at all. And so all these people that were needed to, like, their leases are up, they're moving for work, like they're in process. All these people were like backed up to buy houses.
I don't know how they decided y'all weren't essential, but keep going. Sorry.
Well, thank goodness they decided we were eventually. But I mean, all these people that were sitting waiting for a while, like, they just came out the floodgates when it's like, okay, you can go see houses again. And we went from, maybe get 1 or 2 offers on a house. So we're getting 20, 30, 40 offers. And, North Carolina specifically was a little bit more aggressive because of how the contract is. And I could go a whole story on that. But,
yeah,
the due diligence fee. I mean, people were doing sight unseen offers. People were doing buying houses without inspecting them. I mean, like, I get waiving the inspection contingency, but they were going into houses like, well, but I get that. Like, okay, you're saying this house looks reasonable. I'm willing to accept the risk. But what really scared me was people that weren't even, they're like, well, if I'm waiving that, why am I going to do an inspection? I'm like, don't you want to know what's wrong with it? That was scary stuff. And
it was a crazy time. And then due diligence. And, I know some people probably will listen to this or watch this from other states that may not be familiar with it. North Carolina has 2 things. It's like earnest money deposit, which is probably what most every state has. But
Yeah.
then we also have a due diligence, which is kind of like layaway. If any of you guys are familiar with layaway, like you put a little bit of money towards that and it gets credited, once you buy it. But if you don't buy it, you lose it. Now
It's like I tell people, I was telling people, like, imagine you set this money on fire. How would that make you feel if it went away?
right.
Like you didn't buy this house for some reason or another. And that was like, they're like, well, what do you think I should offer? I'm like, I can't answer that question for you. Here's why I can't answer it for you. It's not my money. Like, I can tell you, here's what other people are offering. And those numbers make me sick to my stomach.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
you were seeing $50,000, $100,000 due diligence fees on $500,000 houses. Like,
it's crazy. And those are non-refundable. I mean, those are non-refundable. Like you said.
You write that check to Mr. Preston Samlin. He's the owner of the house. I write the check to Preston Samlin, and that money's gone. It goes in Preston's bank account, and whether or not I buy that house, he gets that money.
And I've seen it happen. I've seen people walk away from like $50,000, and I'm like, how do you lose $50,000? I mean, that's like a horrible weekend in Vegas, and you didn't even get any free drinks.
you didn't even get a free hotel room. Like, you got nothing.
I know, right? And and this is your interview. I don't want to, hijack it or anything, but we tried to do something there for a while called the walk and talk, where we would go during the showing. And, obviously it's not as good as a full inspection, but it's basically taking an inspector along. Like if you had an inspector dad, that was kind of the idea.
That was my segue for that. I'm like, imagine you took like your dad that used to build houses with you, and he's pointing out all the stuff that could be wrong. Like, that was kind of what it was like. And unfortunately, like, I know that there was some questions about that, but also, like, I found myself now having to, like, obviously I'm not a qualified inspector, and I always tell people this, but I'm like, hey, do you see that right there? Like, that's probably not good. We should get a closer look at that, but that's something to be aware of as we're negotiating.
Right.
Like you have to try and have eyes in the back of your head, because there's so many little things around a house as you walk around. Actually, I haven't released anything. I started recording little segments. Like, there was a house I went to, like, the AC unit was original to the house in 2005. Well, you probably need a budget for that.
18
it's running.
Years old.
Yeah, it's running. It's cold, and that's another story for another day. They make stuff way better back then than they do now. But that's going to break eventually, and you need to keep that in the back of your mind when you're willing to. People were bidding $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 over list price on houses and doing crazy due diligence. It was a scary time, but it was tough, because you would have a conversation with the buyer, and you're like, that's ridiculous. Why would I pay more than the house is listed for? And it often took sometimes people losing out on a house or two before they go, gee, they know what they're talking about. Like, I don't agree with it. I don't think even car dealerships were doing it. Like, hey, the sticker price is $50,000, but we're going to charge you $60,000 for it because there's not that many of them. It was a supply and demand issue.
Well, yeah, you got we saw 10 people moving here a day, so there's not 110 new listings a day. So I think
that's like the struggle.
Yeah, it's like musical chairs, and there's 100 less chairs than there are people.
Yeah.
So when the music stops, what's going to happen?
and that was not the case for a long time. Like, this problem actually goes way back before 2020. The stats are somewhere like, so 2008, there was a glut of houses available at the time.
Oh, it was the opposite problem.
Right. Well, so you had the financing crash, which put more houses on the market. You had all these foreclosures. So what happens? All the new construction builders stopped building. They essentially, if they had land, they sat on the land, but they stopped building houses at the clip that they were building them at. Then they were just starting to ramp back up before COVID hit. Oh, can we say that, or is that going to get flagged on YouTube? I don't know. Before the pandemic, we could say pandemic, but before the pandemic, they were doing great, and then the pandemic hits, and what happens is supply chains got totally screwed up. Lumber was a real big problem. I was actually joking with a friend of mine. I had a covered porch built in my backyard, and I'm sitting there talking with him. I happened to look up at the roof, and I'm like, I think it was May, and the lumber was stamped like March or April. Like, that was never the case. Like, you used to get lumber off the shelves that was a year old.
Right. And it had dried out, the sap or whatever,
Yeah. And
well, when they initiated the due diligence way back, mid 2000s, early 2000s. I can't remember.
Yeah, it was a little bit before my time.
Yeah, well, the idea was, I'll tell you where the idea came from, and initially it was, I get where they were coming from. So they used to be earnest money deposit only, but you were locked in. You were locked in, and you couldn't get out of it. You know what I mean? Like, so some people would find a house, and then for whatever reason they wanted to get out, they decided they wanted another house or something. But seller was like, "Nope, you signed a contract. I'm going to make you buy this house, and I've agreed to fix everything you wanted, but you're locked in." So the idea was that you could pay a due diligence fee, which is the original idea was like, basically it was like 1 month's mortgage fee. And I'm going to pay you your mortgage for a month for me to get all my stuff together, and I can walk away for any or no reason. I mean,
you get to keep your mortgage payment.
Right. And you don't lose it. In a perfect world, that works out. Everybody wins, right? The seller wins, buyer wins, whatever. But then, when it was around, $1,500 or whatever, all right, I hate to lose $1,500, but I've decided I want this other house, or my financing didn't come through, or I found some stuff on that inspection I don't like. I lose $1,500, but I can get out of the contract and go buy another house. And that was well and good, But then when there was, like you alluded to, like we talked about, there was such a little supply and such huge demand that it got out of control, and it's $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. I can walk away from $1,500 and I have a bad day, but I don't know if I could walk away from 30 or 50,000. That's like a bad year.
I mean, that's like the average person's salary for a year. Like, it's crazy to think, like, $50,000-$60,000, like, you just threw a whole year's salary away. I mean, what really was killer is, on top of that, the prices went gangbusters. I mean, I was just having this conversation with somebody the other day, like, your 2019 $150,000, $200,000 home buyer, first time buyer, in most cases, they're now a $300,000, $350,000, $400,000 buyer. And it's like, whoa. Well, when you top all that with the interest rates you're looking at right now, we're having some difficult conversations with people right now. It's like, hey, I want to buy my first house. I'd like my mortgage payment. We've got $1,500. Like, great, to get you a $150,000 house. I'm just making up numbers and rounding stuff up, but like, oh, okay, great. What can you show me? I had one woman. She was an online lead, and she's like, I'm sorry, actually it was a guy, but not that it really matters. But we had a long conversation about what he's qualified for and what he wanted to buy and what he wanted in his property. He wanted to be in the outskirts. He wanted an acre of land. So I started sending him properties that match that criteria. He's like, can you please stop sending me properties that I wouldn't let my dog live in? I'm like, hey, I get it. Like, we had that conversation. Like, this is what's out there. It's so limited right now. I mean, you have, 10 people that want that $150,000 house that needs everything.
Yeah. Well, and I'll give you a real world example. And my daughter brought it to my attention. So my daughter, I have two daughters, and one just graduated college, and she got her first job. She's working for a packaging company, so she's making $65,000 plus commission, which I think is great. But
she probably can't buy much of a house with that, can she?
Well, here you go. So I got out of college, and I was a teacher. I think I had a master's. I was making $26,000 in 1990.
What year was that?
1994.
Okay.
So,
all right.
So hear me out. I bought my first house. We still own this house today, by the way. It's a rental.
Awesome.
Over in Amity Gardens, over where the Independence and Sharon Amity, kind of back up in there. Yeah. Nice neighborhood. So that same house, I bought it for $84,000. We still own it. It's worth over $400,000 now, which is great. We held on to it. We paid it off. I can't ever sell it because the taxes will kill me unless I do a 10 or something. But anyway, neither here nor there. I want you to keep two numbers in mind. Made $26,000. House was $84,000. All right. So, and I told her as soon as she got out of college, I was like, honey, as soon as you can, you need to buy a condo or house. She just got an apartment with 3 friends. All well and good. She's 22 years old, but, I said, as soon as you can, buy a house. But she's like, Daddy, look, you made 26 and the house was 84. Think about that. I make 65. And I was a teacher, one of the lowest paying professions there are. She's got a pretty good job. 65, house is 400. Do you see the difference there in the
It does. They don't add up.
I mean, I almost had more than a third of the house. I mean, close to between the third and, I made about 40% of the cost of the house. And now she's not even 25%. She's like, 15% of the house. You see what I'm saying? Plus the interest rates are higher.
And
So
what's
worse.
and
She has like a real job. I mean, not that teaching.
Yeah.
All the teachers gonna be mad. No, teaching's a real job.
No, teaching's a real job. It just doesn't pay well, like it never has, unfortunately. But what's crazy, Preston, is on top of that, most of these kids have college debt, student loan debt, which that counts against their debt calculations too. I mean, we've been lucky in the last couple of years, like they've been on deferment, so it hasn't counted against them. But I mean, that counts into their debt calculation, which it's rough. And actually, during the pandemic, that was a struggle too, because your FHA, your VA borrowers, the government loan products, they weren't even getting looked at because they were seen as not having as much skin in the game. So you had to be a conventional buyer that was coming in with, substantial down payment money to be able to bridge the gap between what the house was actually worth and what people were paying. But now that's all switched again. It's kind of gone back to, we're seeing a lot more government loan products because the down payment that's available to most people is a lot smaller. Inflation's through the roof right now. And people are just having to really be very careful about what they're spending, it's wild.
100%. Well, let me ask you this. I have a couple of questions. Sorry, we went on and on about that, Brett, but
that's all right.
What, let's say somebody like my daughter or, somebody equivalent came to you, she's locked into a lease for a while, but, do you have, let's say somebody came to you that makes $65,000 a year and they may, they got a significant other who's not, they haven't tied that knot. It may happen, what do you have any creative ways? What would you suggest for somebody like that? Or,
I'm going to do some math really quick because it'll help me. Hold on. I had a text I needed to answer. I'm meeting somebody a little bit later, but let me check my calculator really quick. So 65,000, if you divide that by 12 months, that's $5,400. I'm going to round it. It's $5,400 a month.
Is it still that like average, 26 and 30, whatever, can't be your ratios or something?
So your total debt to income, it varies on the loan product. I'll just use 40% for argument's sake, right? Mm-hmm. Allows you with no other debt. Your mortgage payment can be $2,166 a month. And that includes your HOA, your taxes, your insurance, all that gets factored in that calculation. So if I divided that by 360 months, that's not right. But a $2,100. Okay, actually, I can give you a real life example. I have a buyer that's buying a house right now for $262,000 in York, South Carolina. Her mortgage payment's actually about that. The taxes are a little bit higher there because it's in a city. York City taxes are a little bit higher, so I think it's like $3,000 a year taxes. But she's a first-time buyer in her 40s. Wow. This is her first house, so. The only thing you can really do in that scenario is if I have a couple that's coming to me that's not tied the knot yet, it's a conversation of like, well, how serious are you guys?
Yeah. I mean, can we combine the incomes? I know where you're going with that because that's the same thing I was thinking too. If you combine the incomes, that'll help a little bit,
It help that the fact of the matter is for most young people, how old's your daughter? You told me, I think, already, but I don't remember.
22.
So that's great that she's considering that. At 22, I mean, she could probably buy a reasonable house if she has no other debt. But the fact of the matter is, and I don't know your daughter, she probably has a car loan. She probably has student loans at minimum. I mean, most people, car prices went crazy too. So you can't, I remember when I was her age, I could go out and buy a used car for $2,000-$3,000 and actually ran.
Oh, yeah. Now a used car is $17,000.
And that's a car that's 10 years old.
Yeah, 100%.
It's wild.
Well,
so for somebody, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but somebody that comes in that situation, finding a house for $260,000 is tough. You're not going to be in Charlotte. You're going to be, on the outskirts of Charlotte, Gaston County, maybe Lancaster County, and not even Indian Land. You're probably in Lancaster at that point. Matter of fact, if I think I sold a house in Lancaster about this time last year, new construction, like small builder, out in the middle of nowhere. But it was $260,000. But you're not going to live in Indian Land for that price unless maybe you get a townhouse. But then you get a townhouse.
I was getting ready to say a townhouse or condo. But like you said, you have to factor in the HOA on that payment too.
And average, I would tell you on a townhouse, Indian land, most recent ones I've looked at, average HOA dues are anywhere from $200-300 a month, depending on, amenities and how old it is and how well I could go into a whole conversation on this, how well the HOA has managed the finances. Because a lot of times these communities, they're aging, they haven't been budgeting appropriately. Now they've got to jack the dues up to cover, new roofs or whatever the case is. Yeah. So let's say it's $300. Well, now your payment is what you can afford is, $1,700-1,800.
Right, to make the 21.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Bill Gallagher with Superior School of Real Estate, and I'm here with Preston Sandlin of Home Inspection Carolina. Preston, I've always liked your style, especially those pants, and also I've been interested in the home inspection business for a long time.
Well, Bill, that's ironic. I've always admired your style, and I've always admired your ability to educate these fine folks for sometimes 4-8 hours a day. I wish that I could do what you do.
Hey Preston, wouldn't it be cool if we switched? Preston, we sure got what we wished for, buddy.
We sure did. And now that you're the expert, Bill, you are wearing the pants, and I'm the instructor and the educator. Tell us what Home Inspection Carolina is doing these days to make the home buying process easier for realtors and home buyers.
Well, Preston, all our home inspection reports now are online for the real estate agent and the client to review the report online and to be able to create a repair list basically online by either clicking repair, accept, monetary compensation, and once they prepare the request, they can then press email, text, or print right then.
You mean it's all automated, Bill?
Absolutely, we are high tech.
Wow. What else is Home Inspection Carolina doing different these days?
Well, Preston, we're training our home inspectors to be non-alarmist. We are training them to put things into perspective and to simplify the message for the hopeful homeowner.
Non-alarmist is key, Bill. You remember those days of the 100-page reports and those 3-ring binders that would just go on and on and on, la 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 la. Thank you for being a good non-alarmist.
And Preston, one more thing. We fix the small stuff for free. Do you remember when home inspectors always put those little nitpicky items on those reports?
Oh, bless their hearts.
Well, at Home Inspection Carolina, if we can fix it in 5 minutes or less, we do it for free. We're better with a caulk gun than a keyboard any day. We just fix it.
You mean there's no cost for this, Bill?
Preston, it's free.
Wow.
Well, Preston, these pants really are a catch.
Well, Bill, I've enjoyed wearing the suit, but I don't think I could wear it every day because I got to fix the small stuff for free, and I don't want to ruin a good suit.
Preston, it's been a lot of fun flipping the switch.
Oh, and by the way, you probably need a down payment plus your closing costs. Now, on the plus side, the interest rates have actually opened up a little bit of a door, if you will, to where some sellers are a little bit more willing to chip in some money for closing cost credits, because your closing costs could cost you on a house that size, $5,000-6,000 on top of your 3% down payment. Now you're $12,000-15,000 in it. I'll bet your daughter doesn't have that sitting in just hanging around $15,000. I mean, there's stuff out there. There's down payment assistance and grant programs, and they vary all the time. So I don't want to get any specifics, but a lot of times they come with higher interest rates too, because it's higher risk to the bank because you've got less skin in the game.
You know what's driving me crazy about the whole thing? She just moved into an apartment with 2 of her friends.
Paying how much?
That's what I was going. That's where I'm going. Now they want to live in South End, and South End's cool. I mean, if you're 22 years old, 20s or 30s, South End is the place. They're right there on the rail line and all this.
Yeah.
But there's 3 of them. My daughter got the smaller room. She specifically wanted the smaller room, so she's paying a little bit less. She's paying $1,500. The other 2 are paying $1,700. So do the math on that. 17
$4,000?
$4,700 a month. I mean, that's what's driving me crazy. I'm like, $4,700 a month.
You want me to make your
a
head
$1
hurt?
million house for
You want
that?
to make your head hurt? The house I'm living in right now, I paid $350,000 for in 2018. I'd probably sell it now for $650 or $700. We put a couple things into it. Nothing like honestly, the covered porch on the back is probably the biggest thing I've done to it. So $650, $700, somewhere there. But my mortgage I refinanced back when the rates were like stupid low.
Right.
So I think the mortgage was for like $330 something. And my rate's 2.375. Taxes, insurance, principal, and interest. My payment is I think it's like $1,900 a month.
Yeah.
And I have 3,300 square feet, and your daughter's paying that to rent a room.
I know.
It's wild. Like, I feel bad for them. But the
reality they signed a year lease. I told her, I was like, go ahead and have fun for a year, enjoy it, go through your thing. But after that, we're getting you in a place somehow, because right now you're paying somebody else's mortgage.
Right. Well, and so one of the things we see with younger borrowers, and I'm not saying you should do this with your kid, and this is a lender question more than it is me, but what we see sometimes with younger borrowers is, their credit's kind of limited, so that also will jack up their interest rate. Not that their credit's bad, they just don't have a big history at that point for a lot of people. Interesting tidbit: if you've got a kid, I think the youngest you can do it is age 16. If you have a credit card that you regularly pay off every month, you can add them as an authorized user, and that will help build their credit history before they even get to use any credit. Obviously, don't put that on a card if you're maxing it out, because it's going to hurt them. But at 22, let's say they have nothing else. They've got 4 years of credit history. They probably have one credit card, maybe a car loan. They don't have a whole lot of history for the bank to look at, so their interest rate's higher. They're probably going to have private mortgage insurance, which is when you get a mortgage for a house that's below 20% down payment. What we sometimes see we have to do is we have to see if a parent or other relative might consider being what they call a non-occupying co-borrower, so they can piggyback off your credit and income. And obviously you don't want to do that unless you think they can make the payment. But the reality of the matter is, I hate that, because they would be paying that in rent, and the people would rent the place to them, but they can't get a mortgage. So then they have to start doing all these other things to try and make it work. But it's tough. Being a first-time borrower right now is tough.
100%. Well, speaking of which, I got to move into so for all the listeners out there, this guy kills it on social media.
See, I don't think I do that great on it, but you always tell me that you see my stuff all the time. So I guess
every time I go there, I was like, there's Brian. So a two-part question here. Lead generation. What do you do for lead generation? And I know you do some social media, and it seems like you're everywhere. I feel like you're doing a great job. So can you talk about that for a minute for realtors that may be listening? What's your advice for them?
So lead generation wise, I would say my social media stuff is a little bit on the newer side. I've always done a little bit of social media. Recently this year, I really dove into doing reels, and I'll take those reels. I'll put them on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Trying to get into YouTube, but that's a little bit of a different animal. I got to work a little bit harder on that one. But I started out just kind of recording some informational ones. I was part of a group that was kind of helping us put together those scripts of things to talk about. Because the hardest part for me is one, I hate being on camera. So when I started doing it, I would send the videos to somebody else to edit, because I'd always want to re-record the videos, and it really wasn't that bad. Once it was chopped up and looking good, it really wasn't as bad as you're your own worst critic, right? You look at your video oh, I sound terrible. Listen, it's called imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
you sound that way to everybody else for your entire life. You just don't realize that you sound that way.
100%.
You sound different. When I'm talking to you right now, I sound different than I will sound on this recording. And so when you listen to it, oh, I sound like that? That's terrible. That's what you sound like to everybody else. So don't get in your own head about it, right? Just do it. There was a phrase, done is better than none. So doing something is better than doing nothing. So I started out doing these ones where it was just me and the computer. I got my phone set up here, and I've got a little script on the side. And in the very beginning, I was reading the scripts, and you could absolutely tell I was reading the scripts, and they were terrible. But then what I started to do is I would just make kind of talking points for myself, stuff that I wanted to hit on. Try not to ramble, because I'm really good at doing that. Try not to ramble about the stuff I'm talking about, but just have the stuff that, okay, I need to talk about X, Y, and Z. Just make sure I hit those and just make it myself, hey, I saw this news story, or hey, this is what's going on, or have you heard this in the industry? And then it actually, I morphed it a little bit. I don't know if you've seen some of these videos. I started reaching out to local businesses, and I would do small interviews with them. And small businesses have always had a special place in my heart, just because really, like you and like me and every other realtor, we're our own small businesses. Like that's what we do. And I've always had a heart for those people, because those people have stepped out on their own and said, I'm done with corporate America. I'm done working for somebody else, and I want to do what I love, but work for myself. So any way I can support that. I remember it's so funny. I did one with Waxhaw Woodworking, and he was a guy that moved here from up north, and I forget what he was doing for work at the time, but he was he helped a neighbor out with a built-in in their living room, and the neighbor posted on the neighborhood Facebook page. Next thing he knew, his phone was blowing up. He had no idea the guy posted it. His phone was blowing up, and people wanted him to do that. He'd always done woodworking on the side as like a hobby, and now he's turned it into his full-time work. I actually bumped into him in Walmart the other day. He's like, "Hey, I've gotten so many people reach out to me after they saw your video." I'm like, well, "That's awesome." Like that was pretty cool. So stuff like that.
I told you you're everywhere. Yeah. I told you.
But it's kind of cool because, like, that didn't cost me anything but my time, really, and it didn't cost him anything. Have I done boosted ads over time? Yeah, I've done a couple of those here or there. I was doing some local segments on, like, the Indian land. I live in Indian Land, South Carolina, so doing the the market here, or the Waxhaw market, or wherever's close by. Just kind of, I did some geo-targeting stuff where, like, it would pop up on people's phones, and I was really getting a lot of hey, you're everywhere. And really, those were actually pretty inexpensive. I could definitely be better at those. It takes a little time to get those dialed in, because you have to really target it toward a specific group of people. But it would get people to reach out to my website, and then it would say, hey, I'm looking to sell my house, or how much do you think my house is worth? And just having conversations with people. I've sold stuff like my whole life. I'm not really the salesman, but I like helping people. And that was one of the reasons I enjoyed real estate, and I enjoyed helping people, kind of how I got to where I am,
And you've definitely done well. I mean, you got in 2016, so you're going on what, 7 years, 8 years there. And, that's my next question. I do a lot of new agent orientations, right? Out of Canopy or whatever. And I've done them for so many years. And it's like, after a while, I'll see a few people in that class later on. I'll see a few people in that class, when I do my research, top realtors and stuff.
Yeah.
The vast majority, if I see them 3-4 years, they're not realtors anymore. So my question to you is, what is the secret sauce, or what to have longevity to make it, 1 year, 2 year? I mean, everybody sells can sell like 1 or 2 houses to their parents and their uncle.
Well, I think they said, but I think the stat is something like, in 5 years. Oh man, I wish I'd done a little research on it. I think if a new realtor starts within 5 years, something like 85% of them are not in the business anymore. It's like very
I would
high.
agree with that. Yeah,
and
you passed that, so you've cleared that. So what do you think? What makes the difference? What do you think?
There's a couple of things. I mean, you have to be able to, in the beginning, you've got to be prepared. You're not going to make money. They say the average realtor, this is going to sound crazy because I know you talk to a lot of people. The average realtor sells, like, I don't know, I think it's like 2 to 4 houses a year. And I sold 32 last year. So this year's a little bit different. I tend to be end of year loaded, where we have a little bit like more stuff in the first quarter of the year is always the slowest, and then the summer and the fall tend to be the part that pick up the most. So I'm probably on target to hit about that same number this year. I'd like to do a little bit more. Now, naturally, prices have gone up, but back to your question, like I think the secret sauce is you've got to align yourself with people that are going to help you. And this is not a dig in any particular brokerage. There are a lot of brokerages out there to do a lot of great training, and training is great, but that's like a Ferrari with no gas. Okay.
Right,
if you have a Ferrari with no gas, you feed this information to a new agent with a fire hose, right? You can't drink from a fire hose. So you have all this information, you don't know what to do with it. You need to collaborate with people that have been successful. And for everybody that looks different, right? So I started out, let me think about this. I was on my own for about a year and a half, and then I joined a big team. Now, I'm not with that big team anymore, but I did learn a lot of what to do and what not to do while working on a team. Because you see, working on a team, you see a lot of different personalities, but you also get to garner some of the knowledge that some of those people have. They'll share little tidbits with you, and you have to find what works for you. The same thing that I do to be successful is not going to work for John Smith, because John Smith's personality is different. His sphere of influence, the people he hangs around with, are different. Consistency is the key, but also, like, it sounds so cliche, but remind people that you're in real estate, not to be sleazy, but people, the average consumer knows probably 10 realtors.
Right.
So why should they pick you? Hopefully they'll pick you because you're the most knowledgeable and you're the most personable and they're the person that you're going to trust. And let's face this too. I've seen it happen on the mortgage side and the real estate side. I think sometimes our friends and family don't want to share their financials with us. Now, it's not to say
very true. Very true.
It's not to say that there's anything to hide there, but some people are very well guarded on that. So guess what? If that's you, reach out to me. I've got a whole referral network of other agents that I know would do a great job for you, because that's what I try to do. I try and collaborate with great agents in this area and other areas too, which, by the way, if you're moving from the Charlotte area to somewhere else, I probably know an agent in that area. And if I don't, one of my colleagues probably does. And if you're moving to Charlotte from somewhere else, I probably know an agent there too. For example, I've got a friend I went to high school with in New York. He sold both my parents' house and my in-laws' house. And I would refer to anybody any day of the week. I'll stop saying, I was going to say something else that I won't say there, but.
You're dead on with that financials though, because I'm like that. I don't like sharing my financials with anybody, honestly. I mean, because it's two ways, right? And I'm not saying which one. If you're doing bad, you don't want people to know. If you're doing good, you don't want people to know.
Well, because then all of a sudden it's Johnny come lately can say, Preston, I really could you loan me like $50,000 for 12 months? I'll pay interest on it. And then
it's kind of like that winning the lottery thing. If I win the lottery, if you see me go missing,
hey,
I won the lottery. I want to be like missing persons.
Interesting tidbit. In North Carolina, if you win the lottery, and I just found this out by accident, I don't remember how I found out. If you win the lottery in North Carolina, you have to publicly announce it. Like, it's public record. In South Carolina, it's not.
You can go anonymous. I would go anonymous.
So don't buy any North Carolina lotto tickets. Only buy South Carolina. Well, no, I think you have to be a resident. For that, but
yeah, that's good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, if I go missing too, I probably won the lotto. But no, I mean it's a really good point. Like it's a double-edged sword too, because even sometimes our clients, like, I'll have to ask probing questions about their finances, and I don't really want to know, but I need to know to be able to help guide you in the best light. Like, I'm going to give you an example. You made a mention you're worried about the taxes on your house. Now, I'm not a CPA, but the general rule is, as a married couple, you get to exempt up to $500,000 of your capital gains.
Right.
So as long as your wife doesn't leave you, you're probably good.
Fingers crossed.
But even then, you get to exempt up to $250,000. And actually, even more interestingly, and I've had to explain this to people before. Let's say you're married and your spouse passes away. They give you, I forget if it's a year or two now. You get that married exemption for like another year or two after they pass. Once that time period is gone, then you're back to being the single person. But it's knowing little tidbits. Like, I've self-educated myself on so many things, and I don't pretend to be an expert in any of those areas, but it's really knowing enough to point you in the right direction. Hey, the general rule is $500,000, but you should talk to your CPA and see what your tax situation is. Oh, wait, you've been doing your taxes yourself? I got a guy you can talk to. I mean, I built that network of, man, if you ask me for a plumber, an electrician, I've got all of them because I've had to use them either personally or for a client over the last 7 or 8 years. And some people have fallen off that list too. As COVID went on and people got busy, it was interesting to see who was answering the phone and who wasn't. You know what I mean? I'm sure you probably dealt with that too.
Let me ask you this, Brian, and I know you're not an accountant, but this question, my wife and I were talking about that. I know the $500,000 exemption. So let's say, I want to downsize, or somebody wants to downsize.
Yeah.
And, all right, so you made, like, when you sell it, your basis in your house, let's say you made $600,000.
Mhm.
So typically you would have to pay tax on the 100, I guess, right? If you're married.
Well, here's something you're forgetting though, too.
But can if I buy the new house, can I roll that into that if it's more, or, that's what I'm wondering. How does that
I think
work?
the answer is no, but there is an important part you're forgetting. So you've owned your house since when? 2000, you said?
2000, this house, 2015.
Oh, you still own your first house, you were saying though, right?
Oh, no. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That house. Yeah. I had that house in 94. But the house we're in right now, 2015, that we lived in. That
But we
other
were
house.
talking about your first house, right?
Yeah. That's a rental. Yeah. We paid that off. That was such
Okay.
a nice moment. Yeah. Bought
So
that in 94.
that I can't use that house as an example because there's so many more. You have a tax guy, I'm hoping, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just haven't.
But that one's got, because you're collecting rent and you're depreciating and stuff, that one's like
Yeah,
a
I've
big stack of
appreciated it. I can
But
never
let's say
sell
it was your primary, and
Yeah,
you're
my
using the-
primary, we've been in since 2015. That's kind of
Okay.
the one I'm thinking about.
So first and foremost, you have to be in it 2 out of the last 5 years, right?
Yeah.
That I know.
Yes.
But also, let's say you've been in a house 8 years, like you have been. Have you had to replace the air conditioner? Have you remodeled the bathroom? Any of that sort of stuff. Now, again,
Adds to the basis, right? Yeah.
right? Check with your tax guy, but all of that stuff counts into, you reduce. Let's say your profit 600,000, but you spent $150,000 in repairs and et cetera over the last 8 years. Well, guess what? You're back below that threshold now.
Right.
That requires a lot more detailed of a tax return than you normally do, but it would certainly be worth it because capital gains taxes are pretty steep.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, well, Brian, let's hit the lightning round.
Uh-oh.
We're gonna have a little bit of fun. Then I'm gonna ask you a question here, and I appreciate, man, you've been sharing some gold nuggets here. All right, hopefully you can hear this. The first one is finish these song lyrics or name the song or the person singing it. Hopefully you can hear it. All right, I'm just gonna play a little snippet of a song. All right, you ready? Here we
Yep.
go. Can you hear it?
No, I can't hear it. No, I still can't hear it.
King of the Hill. I want to wake up in the city that never sleeps.
Oh, is that gonna be New York, New York?
Yes, you got it. You got
Okay.
it. And bonus points. You know who sings it?
It'd be Frank Sinatra, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I'm really
Why
not a
that
good
doesn't
music.
play?
Like,
I can figure that out. Why that's not picked. The mic doesn't pick that up. I'm playing it
that
off
is
my.
weird. Where's your mic?
It's right here. It's like.
Oh, that is strange. You got
Yeah,
you
you would
got
think
a
that
little
would
mic.
pick that up. I mean, I'm playing it off my iPhone here, or not my
Yeah.
iPhone, Android. But anyway, you got it. Good deal. All right, this or that. Christmas Vacation or Elf?
Oh, definitely Christmas Vacation.
All right. Hopefully you won't get in trouble with your wife here. And I think you're old enough to know this one. Ginger or Marianne?
Ooh. Was that the Spice Girls?
No, the Gilligan's Island.
Oh, nah, I wasn't really my thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Ginger was like the Hollywood actress, and Marianne was like the farm girl. Most
Oh.
people go with Marianne, but there's a few that go for Ginger.
Huh.
Yeah, Marianne was like from the Midwest,
Yeah, I don't think I'm
Girl Next
quite
Door.
old enough for that one. Sorry.
The Girl Next Door or the Hollywood glamorous. Oddly enough, we went to the Bahamas this year, and we went to this little thing, and they were like, and they showed us that was the island from Gilligan's Island on the show, and my shirt. I put this on, but I've got it's better. Let me see if I can stand it. It's better in the Bahamas shirt. I don't know if you can see it. It's a remake of one of the Will Ferrell movies. Him and his I think him and the guy he's in all his movies. It was one of their about the shirt. But anyway, I've gone way down.
So about your shirt, it's funny you say that. So the shirt I'm wearing here, actually, I bought on my honeymoon in Hawaii. So I figured I had to fit in with the crowd.
Yeah. I'm known as a crazy pants guy. Brad texted me earlier. Was like, "Do I have to wear crazy pants?" And I was like, "Well, crazy shirt for Zoom." But
in my closet.
yeah, oddly enough, I'll get back to this or that. But So when COVID hit, all the meetings went to Zoom, and I'm known as the crazy pants guy. So I would always go to meetings and things with crazy pants. And now, I mean, pants don't translate so well on Zoom.
Well, and actually, if you want to go further with that, some people would forget they weren't wearing pants. They would Zoom and stand up.
Funny you should say that, because I was on a meeting and they're like, "Hey, it's crazy pants. Show us your pants." And I'm like, I really wish you would have told me that before the meeting. All I had on was gym shorts. I did have on gym shorts, but
at least you had something. Some of these people.
Yeah, there you go. There's been some Zoom meetings that, but anyway, we better get on with it. Would you rather Netflix or YouTube?
Yeah, I think I'm a Netflix guy.
iOS or Android?
Oh, I know you're not gonna like this. I'm an iOS guy. I bought my first Mac computer in like 2011, and quite honestly, my biggest reason I like it is I can text from my phone, my computer. It's all connected. It's all in sync, and I bounce all over the place. So it's good to have it all together.
No, everybody in my family does that except me. I'm the only I'm the only Android PC guy.
You're the group text killer.
Yes, I'm the one. They made a video for me that Taylor Swift. Yes, it's me. I'm the one. Beach or mountains?
Beach or mountains? I'm not much of a beach guy. I think I'd rather the mountains. Actually, a friend of ours had a mountain house. Actually, two friends at this point had mountain houses. They've both since sold, and they were Airbnbs that we got an opportunity to use. And our kids loved it up there. One of them was on the side of the mountain. You could just sit on the back deck and look out and see the sunrise. I mean, I think that's more my jam than the beach. I'm not a sand guy.
I hear you. Yeah, I like it at first, but it gets a little old.
Yeah, and it's hot.
Would you rather have more money or more free time?
If I could do both, Preston, that would be the ultimate goal. I mean, some people don't agree with this logic. I think money is a tool. I think with the right amount of money, you can make more free time for yourself.
100%. That's exactly where that's why do people have private jets? Or I'm definitely not in that category. But
so they don't have to wait in the airport, waste their time, and do. I mean,
they're buying time. They're buying time.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what you're doing.
Same thing with like clean, and over time, I've actually paid somebody, to mow my grass. I can't believe, the first I mowed my grass my whole life.
Me too.
And my wife was like, but at some point I made more money doing inspections than, so, this person's way more efficient at mowing the grass, and they mow it probably in a third of the time it used to take me. And I'm buying time,
No, it's 100%. Like, I'll give you a good example. So I think I pay, I don't know, I think I'm paying my guy $50 or $60 a mow, and him and his guys are in and out in 20 minutes, whereas I'd be out there an hour and a half. Well, as a real estate agent, depending on the property, let's say I'm making $1,000 an hour. That's a no-brainer. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and honestly, I made that move. I really wanted to have more sales under my belt at the point that I did it, but I made the move to have somebody else cut my own grass when my second daughter was born, because I'm like, I'd rather be inside with my kids than out mowing the grass. Now, I do have some pride, so I always enjoyed how the grass looked when it was done, but I didn't like the hour and a half of time I spent out there doing it. I'd rather be doing other things. So
I know it was hard for me to look, because I'd always mowed the grass and took a lot of pride in it. And I remember my wife's the one who kind of talked me into it. And maybe, we did it a couple times on vacation, paid somebody. And then she said we should do that full time. And it was like, I remember looking out the window the first time and I was like, there's another man cutting my grass. It was almost like, there's another man out with my wife.
Yeah.
Well, but now I love it, man. You come home and the grass is done.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Well, what's funny? Do you know what's funny too is actually, so my youngest daughter's turning 3 next week. So it's been about that long that I've had somebody cutting my grass. And I still hadn't sold my lawnmower yet. It's still sitting in my shed. And I had just decided about a month ago, I said, let me make sure that this thing still runs. And I think I'm going to sell it. I mean, it's worked out. Somebody's been cutting my grass now for 3 years. Now I'll still keep, I've got a blower I'll keep. I got rid of the weed eater much longer ago because it was a lot older, but the lawnmower was newer. So I pulled it out, and I was talking to, I mentioned that first time buyer that's buying her first house in her 40s. And her stepdad was at the inspection with me. And I was telling him about the lawnmower. He goes, he says, she could really use a lawnmower. She's kind of strapped for cash right now, buying this house. I said, you know what? I'll just give her that lawnmower when she closes, because she'll need it right away. I mean, she's gonna have grass to mow. And he's like, really? You would do that? I said, what was I gonna get? $200 for it? I mean, it was just a push, self-propelled push mower, nothing crazy. And she's like, are you serious? Like, you don't have to do it. I'm like, you need it. I don't. It's never really been about the money for me,
Yeah, that's cool.
So
you're good. You're ahead of me. I still haven't given up my lawnmower. I haven't used it in probably 5 years, but I
need to make sure it runs still. So I was shocked. Side note, I was shocked that one of the reasons I bought this newer motor is actually, at the time I didn't have a shed, it actually stands up. So it doesn't take up a lot of room.
Stuff leak out of it or something?
No, it's got all seals in or whatever that keeps that from doing. Like, you pay a little extra for that mower, but it saved a ton of room in the garage at the time. But in any event, I laid it down, put some gas in it, let it sit for a few. I said, let me let the oil drip down, and one pole started right up. I'm like,
wow, that's good. Yeah. I kind of grew up like my dad had a whole bunch of old cars and stuff. So
my dad worked at an auto parts store. So
yeah, I grew up kind of being mechanical, not because I was mechanical, but because we were poor.
Yeah.
So I from my dad, I know every trick, like, take the carburetor off, put some, starter fluid, how to do all that. But you're right. Sometimes when they sit for a long time, it's just, you may have to do a little bit of stuff to get it going. You might have to change spark plugs or something.
Yeah. I was shocked. I was expecting it to not start.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. 2 or 3 more questions on this, and I'll let you go. Let's see. Would you rather make a phone call or text?
That depends, and it really depends. So if I can knock it out quicker in a phone call, if it's I need a couple of exchanges of information, I'd rather just get a phone call and get it done with. But if I'm getting to the point now where my phone rings entirely too much. And it's trying to dodge the spammers, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's ringing again. Sometimes it's quicker to just shoot a text.
Yeah, I like text if it's short, but if it's something like with all my folks, if it's something short, I like text because the phone call can be long. But then sometimes it's like really like detailed. Like, I'd rather just call because I'm not that kind of texter to like, if it's complicated, I need to call. I guess.
That's it.
All right. Last question of the this or that, and just 2 questions total. Last question and most important, the toilet paper question. Over or under? In other words, is it
over?
Over. That's what.
How do I rank on that one? What do you get more of, overs or unders?
95% are over. Yeah. I've had a few unders, but one person told me the reason they were under is they have cats. And the cats are less likely to.
They'll just spin it around and around versus unraveling it. Although, now that I've got young kids, maybe I should be reconsidering that.
Well, I know a bunch of home inspectors, obviously, and I'm in a bunch of different groups.
Yeah.
I know one inspector, if he sees it under, he'll switch it. I'm like, man, you can't be doing that in people's houses.
Oh, man.
He's actually filmed a video. He's like, it's under, and it's like he did like with thumbs down, and then he changes it, and then he goes thumbs up. Actually, pretty cool video.
That's pretty funny.
I might need to do that. That'd be a good video. Awesome. Well, last question for you, Brian. I know you got a lot to do today. What is the wildest, craziest, or weirdest real estate story, or craziest thing, or wildest thing that's ever happened to you? And you can change the names to protect the guilty.
Oh man.
What's the craziest thing or weirdest? Because I have a home inspection podcast. I always ask them, what's the craziest thing you've ever found on an inspection? And, they come up with some crazy stuff. But I know real estate, it could be more of a story or things that happen. So what's the craziest, wildest, weirdest thing that you've ever seen or witnessed or seen happen in a real estate?
You want to know something? It probably would be my own last home purchase. So let me see if I can short story this because it's kind of long. So there was a house in my neighborhood that I actually consulted on a listing for. And I said to my wife, I said, I kind of like this house. It's a little bit bigger than ours, and so on and so forth. And so they're like, well, we won't take it off. And they end up listing with somebody else. But
they're using you for free advice.
Yeah. So they listed with somebody else, and back and forth. My wife and I were talking about it, and Lauren says, well, why don't we shoot him an offer? I said, okay. So I sent him an offer, and they're like, well, we won't take the offer from you until your house is on the market, because we had to sell our house to buy the new house. Okay. We got our house on the market in a week and a half. Great. The very day we got it on the market, theirs went under contract.
Oh no! So now you're homeless.
Well, not homeless. Ours is on the market. We hadn't got any offers yet, but yeah, I mean, the potential is there, right? Like, oh well, crap, now what do we do? So I was talking to a neighbor of mine, and they said, well, you should talk to Fran. Fran might know somebody's looking to sell a house in the neighborhood. And I said, okay. So I called Fran, and Fran's like, well, I'll sell you my house for the right price. And I said, okay. So I said, when can Lauren and I come over and take a look at it? And, you know, we went over a couple of days later, looked at it, loved it, put an offer in on it, accepted our offer, but we still weren't under contract on our house.
Oh,
So, you know, we started out at one price, and it was a little on the higher side. So we dropped the price a couple of times. I had been talking to an agent that had, well, let me back up a second. My first day on the market, I had an open house, and a guy came through that I knew, and he was a local real estate investor. And I said, oh, I'm thinking he's in there to buy the house as an investment. No, he's looking for a house for himself. And he says, yeah, you know, this is my agent's information, and you know, you could chat with him, and maybe we'll be able to work out something. Okay. So the price was too high. Their house wasn't on the market yet. Dropped the price again. I mean, little bits at a time. I think it was like $2,500. We weren't way off the mark, but and this was in 2018, so the market there was plenty of inventory, so it wasn't really a thing. And we kept looking around. We had still, you know, we were trying to decide on whether we wanted to stay in the same neighborhood. We ended up, like I said, going under contract on that house down the street, really. And so I mentioned earlier that I was on a team that I'm no longer on, and so we had parted ways while my house was on the market. So I had to withdraw my own listing and relist it. And ironically enough, the agent that I mentioned earlier that was representing that buyer that came through, I called him and said, hey, he had his own brokerage at the time. I said, do you think I could hang my license with you? And he said I could. So when I went back on market, we dropped the price one more time. The price was where their buyer wanted it to be. They put an offer in. They got their house on the market, went under contract on their house in one day. And so everything's all honky-dory. And we come up to, I want to say it was about a week or so before closing.
Right.
And the buyer of their house, so now there's 4 houses involved in this.
Yeah. I'm sitting here thinking there's a lot of
buyer of my house,
yeah.
My house, the house I'm buying, and the house that the people I'm buying from are buying, which is new construction. Okay.
Right. A lot of moving parts.
Yeah. Yep. You're very right. So their buyer starts having issues with their financing. I'm like, oh geez, what are we gonna do? Blah blah blah. Well, then my buyer all of a sudden has an issue with their financing. My financing's rock solid. We're all good, and everybody else is having problems. Like, what the? So the first buyer of the first house, they ended up coming up with cash. I don't know how they did that, but now the people that are buying my house, they got their financing ironed out, but they wouldn't sell it to the people that were buying their house until they closed on my house. Well, the buyer of their house was getting ready to walk because it was taking too long. So this all happens like we were supposed to close like the week after Thanksgiving. We already had plans to go out of town for Thanksgiving. So we came back from Thanksgiving, and this is all taking place that weekend. Their buyers are talking about walking. We're packing up our moving truck. We had hired movers that were packing moving truck. And we were going to stay with a friend for a couple of days while, you know, all this got sorted anyway. That was the plan all along. Right. Long story short, we rented our house to the buyers for 10 days while we stayed at a friend's house. And it all went through. Yeah. But my wife fired me as an agent a couple of times because she's like, what do you mean we're renting our house to them? I said, if they don't move in our house, they won't sell their house, and their buyer is going to walk away. And then we have all 4 of these transactions just blew up.
Right.
She didn't like it, but she understood. Literally, I was sitting at a conference room table with my transaction coordinator going, if we move this house post-it note here, and this, like, how do we make this work?
Wow.
And the funniest part was, I don't remember now all the details because this was in 2018. I think the buyer of my house I think his wife was not on board with paying us to rent our house, but he did it anyway. If I remember right, but
well, it's awesome that you kept that deal alive and you kept it, and that's a testament to actually you being a good realtor. I mean, because
man,
realtors deal with that sort of stuff.
We dealt with that a lot during the 2020, 2021, where people were upgrading houses, and it was like pulling teeth. Like, we're within hours of screwing something up. Like, here's what we got to do.
Right. Yeah, and that happens. It's like buyers and sellers, and that's contingent on this. It's a couple of dominoes, and if one of those dominoes doesn't fall, it kind of messes up everything. So
yeah, I had another deal where I represented the sellers, and they actually were buying it for sale by owner that I didn't rep them on, but there was like 4 houses in that deal, and I remember getting an email from the attorney. He's like, "Okay, this closing, we got everybody to use the same attorney. Thank goodness, because if we hadn't, it probably would have been a disaster." They had first closing, second closing, third closing, fourth closing. Like it took up like half the attorney's day, I think.
Yeah, well, that is a good idea to use the same attorney. I hadn't thought about that.
If you can, people get weird about it. There's nothing really to be concerned about. They're just really facilitating a transaction. They're not really...
an attorney's not really. Yeah, I could get it. I know some people might be like conflict of interest. I don't think the attorney's it's just a transaction for them, but it makes it easier. I can imagine
you don't have to send wires all over town. You're wiring hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, in the last second, this person doesn't have that. If it's all in the same office.
Yep.
Yeah. Good job. Well, Brian, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Preston.
Giving a whole bunch of gold nuggets. If somebody wanted to know more about you or your team, and if anybody got value out of this, first, let's go give this guy some love. Follow him on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. So let me, I'm just going to open it up to you, Brian. What are all the places that people can find you and follow up with?
I think you hit most of them. You got Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and then I'm still working on YouTube. And then I've got, of course, my website at homegrownpropertygroup.net. And then, I'm just around town here.
What's your handle on? Is it just Brian McCarron?
It's going to be Homegrown Property Group on Instagram and TikTok. And then Facebook, they can just find me by my name.
Okay, so homegrownpropertygroup.net on the internet, and then Homegrown Property Group on Instagram. And is that your TikTok, or is it Brian?
I think it shows my name, but the handle is Homegrown Property Group.
Awesome. Well, everybody who listened to this, if you got some value, and you did, go follow, like, subscribe, whatever. Each format's a little different.
Yeah.
But follow up with them, and Brian is and you're building out a team too, right? So if somebody's interested in
absolutely
starting out, and I'm sure you'd be great building a team because you went through that process yourself. So now you probably know sort of the pros and cons. I mean, that's what happened with me as a home inspector. I worked for a multi-inspector firm, and I learned a lot of things, and I don't have anything bad to say about but I took what was good from that and some things that I wanted to add to it, and that's I imagine you sort of do the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I really enjoy helping out new agents, to be honest. So yeah, for sure, if anybody's interested in getting there started, and I would, as a side note, I think it's, especially in the environment we're in now, I think being on a team to start might be a very good opportunity for you. I mean, you're gonna be giving up some of your commission, but I think that the value you get back out of that is definitely a win-win.
Yeah, 100%. And getting out of I have my real estate license just so that I can have the key, but I don't buy or sell because I'm not competition. But I go through what you go. But in home inspection, there's schooling, real estate, there's schooling, just like there's schooling to get a driver's license. But that schooling alone is not enough. I mean,
no, it just keeps you out of jail.
Right. Yeah, I remember when I got my driver's license, the day I got it, I get in the car with my dad, and I was like, "Dad, I know that you drive faster than the speed limit, but I'm going to drive the speed limit. I'm going to, I was going to do it by the book." Man, I got out on the highway and I about got run over.
Oh yeah. Especially if you're on 45.
That day, there's like all this stuff you learn in school, and then there's like the real world. Not that stuff's not important. It is, but I think you need both. And, it's like both my daughters, they were terrible drivers when they first started driving. I mean, they had the schooling, and both of them had little bump ups, but now they're a lot better drivers because they've learned real world stuff. So
I think you get a lot of experience, real world experience makes a difference for sure.
100%. So good idea to join somewhere, a team or training or something, because
Yeah,
you need the real world experience.
absolutely.
Awesome.
I agree.
Well, follow this guy, subscribe to this guy, and thank you so much for your time, Brian. And I'll catch you on the flip side, or I'll see you on TikTok.
All right. Thanks, Preston.
You've been listening to the Successful Real Estate Broker Podcast with your host, Preston Sandlin. Join us on the next episode where we'll be talking to a successful agent or vendor about the right things to do and the wrong things you should avoid. Join us on the next episode of the Successful Real Estate Broker Podcast.